Welcome to this session of e-learning. For first year students of botany, semester 2, BOC 102, course title Biodiversity 2, Vascular Plants. The title of the unit, Unit 3, Introduction to Plant Taxonomy. The module name, Identification and Classification of Plants. I, Dr. Maria A. D'Souza, Assistant Professor, St. Xavier's College, Mapsa, Goa, will present to you this module. The outline of the module is Identification and Classification of Plants. Once the student completes this module, the student will be able to explain the terms identification and classification. Describe the methods of identifying unknown plants. And finally, describe the classification of plants. One of the main functions of plant taxonomy is nomenclature, identification, and classification. The main aim of plant taxonomy is to provide an ideal system of classification. And construction of an ideal system of classification necessitates a convenient method of identification, description, nomenclature, and tracing the natural affinities of a taxon as far as possible. Let's start with the identification. It is the first and foremost aspect of study. The identification or determination or recognizing of an unknown taxon is based on overall similarities and differences with an already known taxon. Proper and correct determination of a taxon is a prerequisite for any study based on it. It is generally made by comparing the unidentified taxon directly with another already known taxon, which has been authoritatively predetermined either by a direct method or an indirect method, and assigning a correct rank and position. Characters are derived from gross morphology as sufficient for provisional determination, but other characters are also considered at the same time. Some of the features of identification: analyzing relevant characteristics, straightforward and easy, reproducible, fast, inexpensive. Identification involves finding a name for an unknown specimen, and this may be achieved by the following methods. Number 1, expert determination. Number 2, recognition. Number 3, comparison. And number 4, use of keys, synopses, outline, etc. Let's go to the first one, expert determination. In terms of reliability and accuracy, it is the best method. Experts are engaged in botanical gardens, herbaria, museums, universities, and other organizations. They have prepared treatments such as recent floras, manuals, monographs, revisions, synopsis of taxa in question. Despite being a reliable method, this method presents a problem of requiring valuable time by experts and creating delays for identification. Number 2, recognition. In reliability, recognition approaches expert determination as it is based on extensive past experience of the identifier with plant or plant group in question. The third method, comparison. It involves comparison of a plant in question with identified and named specimens, illustrations, photographs, or descriptions. Despite this being a reliable method, it's time consuming and sometimes becomes virtually impossible due to lack of suitable material for comparison. The reliability of this method also depends on accuracy and authenticity of description, photograph, or illustrations of the named specimen used for consumption. Number 4. Use of keys, synopsis, outlines, etc. By far, this is the most widely used method. It requires a long time, experience in comparison and recognition. Field guides help us to identify organisms. They highlight the differences between similar organisms. In recent years, the methods of taking photographs of plant or plant parts, uploading this picture on the website, making an inquiry from the concerned electronic list and news group to look at the photographs and send their comments to the inquirer is gaining popularity. After an unknown specimen has been provisionally identified, with the help of key, its identification can be further confirmed with detailed description of taxon provided in literature sources employed, like floras, monographs, manuals, and identification are very important sources of literature. In case the specimen in question doesn't agree or you cannot compare with existing predetermined specimen, then it is to be taken new to science. And this is the most exciting situation for a taxonomist to discover a new taxon. This is the first part of our module. Coming to the second part of our module, that is classification of plants. Now, in order to study classification, one needs to know that our ability to distinguish and classify objects is very important. We can distinguish food from poison, friend from foe, useful substances from those which has no value. The earliest plant classification were probably similar to those of present-day folk cultures or tribal people. These classifications categorize plants according to their useful properties. However, the botanists were only using characteristics that they could see, like morphological characters, and deciding which differences were important and which to ignore was purely speculative and based on the prejudices of individuals. So the first written classification, which is still in existence, are those of the ancient Greek authors such as Theophrastus and Dioscorides. So what Theophrastus did was he provided a rudimentary plant classification on the basis of form and texture of 500 cultivated plants in the botanical gardens at Athens. He published it in a book called as Historia Plantarum. He classified and described plants into herbs, undershrubs, shrubs, and trees. He considered trees to be highly evolved, while herbs very primitive. He also distinguished between annuals, biennials, perennial plants. His classification was strictly artificial, and the plants listed in his book claimed to indicate distinction between dicotyledons and monocotyledons. There are a number of characters that he considered, like centrifugal, centripetal inflorescences, hypogynous, perigynous, epigynous, gamopetalous, polypetalous conditions. Now, after Theophrastus, the scientific study of plant classification in Europe began properly in the 18th century, and it was by a Swedish botanist, Carolus Linnaeus, and he is to be credited with establishing the naming system that we still use today for living organisms. So what is classification with this background? The arranging, ordering, and grouping of organisms into orderly groups according to their resemblances on the basis of shared properties and functions in a particular taxon. The study of plant classification is known as taxonomy, and it's done by specialized botanists called taxonomists, who are scientists who specialize in identifying, naming, and classifying organisms. If you see on this Earth's surface, there are billion known species of organisms, and only a very few small percentage of organisms are identified and classified. New organisms are still being found and identified. Keeping in view this enormous number of species on the plants on this planet, it is impossible to study them individually. Thus, it becomes very necessary to study them in an organized manner, place them into small or large groups on the basis of their similarity and differences. And this is what exactly classification does. These groups, the taxa, are then arranged in a sequential order into categories according to their levels. Each category is given a name in accordance with the rules of nomenclature. Similar individuals are grouped under a species, similar species under a genus, similar genera under family, and so on. Thus, classification is an arrangement of organisms into groups on the basis of similarities by rank or position and placing them within the taxonomic hierarchy following a certain criteria. These groups are in turn assembled into more inclusive groups until all the organisms have been assembled into a single most inclusive group. In the sequence of increasing inclusiveness, groups are assigned to a fixed hierarchy of categories such as species, genus, family, order, class, and division, and the final arrangement constituting a system of classification. The process of classification also includes assigning appropriate position or rank for a new as well as an old taxon, dividing a taxon into smaller units. A taxon that has been recommended, splitted, united, transferred, or altered in rank. Once we establish a system of classification, it provides an important mechanism and source of storage, retrieval, and usage of information of organisms. In order to see the benefits of classifying, accurately and uniformly names organism, prevents misnomers such as starfish, jellyfish that aren't really fish, uses same language for all names. These are the references, students. These are the online references. And thank you, students, for a patient hearing.